So we'll move along to another question here. What are some of the negative personal, social, and psychological effects of precarious work?
I could go, sure, why not? So I would say the biggest, we talk about personal, social, and psychological effects, but, as I mentioned, precarious work is a health issue. And specifically, there was a study done last year by the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health, linking raising the minimum wage to actually lowering certain things called like diseases of despair, such as suicide and drinking. For every dollar in the US that they raised the minimum wage, suicides actually dropped by 3.4% to 5.9%. There's a pretty strong relationship. It's expensive and it's very difficult to be poor. If you are cheated out of your pay and you can't pay your rent, or if you are not paid your paid sick day, things can very easily spiral out of hand. If your car breaks down by emergency, you can't get it fixed, you can't get to work, you lose your job, you have to do a payday loan to pay your rent. Things get bad very, very fast. And, whether it's lack of pay, whether it's commuting lots of distances, whether it's not actually spending time to take care of your health because you just have to work multiple jobs and dealing with all this stuff. Yeah, I don't know how to make it more clear, but it's stressful,
Thanks, Jared. Sarom or Amber, did you want to jump in on this one? All right, so next.
I think Jared kind of said everything quite eloquently and concisely. It's a health issue. From a graduate student perspective, I think what this precarious work for them means being able to succeed academically or not. One of the biggest reasons why folks will drop out of a PhD is because it becomes too expensive. It's something that they can't afford, and a lot of that is related to not getting access to either a well-paying job, particularly for international students. Domestic students have a lot more access to a lot more different funding opportunities than international students. But I don't want to go on too long about it. But yeah, Jared kind of said it really concisely and nicely.
All right, thanks for that, Amber. So we actually have a viewer question now. Can you comment on how precarious work can contribute to the spread of COVID-19? For example, in long-term care homes, what are the most important remedies?
So I think, we have seen so much that a lot of these outbreaks have happened in long-term care homes and outside of health facilities. The largest outbreaks of the virus are on migrant worker dominated industries. So that includes, we heard in Alberta, meat processing plants where there are many migrant workers who are working there, as well as, Green Hill Produce, Byland nurseries, these where agricultural migrant workers are working. And when talking about care, some of the folks who really never make it into the conversation are care workers. So migrant care workers who often live in their employers' homes and take care of the family and the children and do the socially reproductive labor that is so important. But migrant care workers don't have access, again, to rights and protections because of their temporary status here. So during the crisis, we were hearing about migrant care workers who were not allowed to leave the home because employers thought that migrant women were the vectors of the virus, that they would somehow bring the virus and transmit it to the family, right? This is all very much along the lines of colonial racial hygiene politics, right? We also heard about employers who fired migrant care workers for this along the same, racially prejudiced fears. Many migrant care workers were left without homes, without access to any sort of stability, who have had to stay with, move from house to house or stay with potentially abusive partners because they had nowhere else to go. So for precarious work, when thinking about precarious work and especially care and health care, we have to know that a lot of personal support workers are racialized migrant women, as are care workers who do the very essential work of making the economy run and making sure that we are cared for, right? And so if they are doing that work, we have to ensure that they are, again, able to access rights and protections that come with stable status here.
Thanks so much for that, Sarom. Did either of our other panelists want to jump in on this question? All right, so let's move along to another question. Probably one of my favorite questions that we have. How do we respond to the argument of creating jobs versus creating good jobs, i.e. non-precarious jobs?
Sure. I think Doug Ford said the best form of welfare is a job, and the government keeps repeating that over and over. Our government is open for business. We're going to create jobs, and that's going to help alleviate poverty. It's great if someone has a job versus no job, but the quality of the kind of job is very, very important. The minimum wage in Ontario is $14 an hour. In October 2018, they did a study of all the affordability of neighborhoods across Canada. In Toronto, if you want to afford an average one-bedroom apartment, that's going to cost you 79 hours of work a week, which is not possible. Let's say you have are trying to start a family and your wife wants to stay at home or your partner wants to stay at home. A two-bedroom apartment will cost you on minimum wage. It would take 96 hours per week to actually afford a two-bedroom apartment. So a job is better than no job, but the quality of the job matters quite a bit. So it's not just about creating more and more gig economy work, more and more part-time, low-paying, precarious work. Yeah, jobs are great, but good jobs for all, Sarom, Amber.
Yeah, I think just to build on that, absolutely, we must be creating not just jobs, but good, meaningful jobs that pay a fair wage, that, are jobs that people care about. From a graduate student perspective, I mean, graduate students are, kind of the backbone of the university, right? They're expected to do research and, and enhance the university's reputation. They seem to be selective in this, the students that they choose to enroll for a reason, right? So, when students are not able to access meaningful work that's building their skill set, that's paid well, it means that it's really difficult for them to be graduate students and to not just produce meaningful research, but also to do other things that are part of the graduate student experience, like meeting their peers and having time to socialize, potentially explore a new city and things like that. So, there's obviously a lot more issues, again, that related to international students versus domestic students, related to creating good jobs. Oftentimes international students, I think, Sarom, you did say international students can access most jobs on campus, but, at least at Ryerson, I know there are some rules around those jobs might be available to them, but only for a certain amount of hours, for example. And that's, I think, really dependent on the collective agreement, as well as whatever their program that they've been admitted to says they're allowed to work. So for example, like in engineering, students can only work 130 hours a semester as an international student. And so those types of limitations that are put on students also make it really difficult for them to find work, and then oftentimes they're working under the table, which puts them in an increasingly precarious situation. So it's so necessary for universities to be creating good jobs that pay well. that build skill sets.
100%. And if I can just jump in quickly, when we fight collectively for decent jobs and good jobs, it means that we have that much more bargaining power. So at our unions and any of our, organizing assemblies, when we are engaging the most directly impacted and negatively affected members, who are often racialized and migrant members, that means that when we boost our union, our membership engagement, we have that much more bargaining power to fight for what we need and win our demands. So right now, Amber, you mentioned this earlier, but just through COVID and the whole online course situation, it'll be on the precariously employed contract faculty, many of whom are graduate students, to work things out, like students who are overseas in different time zones, trying to figure out how to access a textbook link or how to access a course online, all different hours of the night. And that a lot of that labor goes uncompensated. And students are obviously very stressed, and their immediate the way that they direct that will be to the person who is in a position of authority, which is often the instructor. And so it just creates a negative situation overall. And if we were to come together as precariously employed faculty and as migrant students and everybody, all students and workers who are impacted, and punch up together to really question why, in the absence of public funding for education, that we are left to really scramble for scraps, then that means that we have that much more collective power. And I think already I'm seeing that happen. And like magnets, we're all gravitating toward each other. Just this panel alone, I think, is an indication of that. And it's extremely heartening to see.
Thanks so much for that, folks. So that leads me to a bit of a follow-up question. So would you say that all unionized work is good work, or can unionized work also be precarious?
So yeah, I think that union work is certainly better work than non-unionized work. And oftentimes unionized work can be permanent work, with worker protections and things like that. So that type of work is certainly good work. However, there are some jobs that are unionized that are precarious in nature, and that's certainly how it is within an academic setting. Even if you are unionized within QP, you're reapplying for your job every 4 months. You don't have the best benefits in the world, or none at all, depending on how many courses you might be teaching, or how many hours you might get as a TA or GA, at least at some universities. So I mean, while there's some protections, and while there are collective agreements that are meant to help with those, they can certainly be broken, and they are broken. And you see that a lot at, especially at colleges right now, less so in the university sector, but colleges where there's been a decrease in enrollment generally across colleges. They've been laying off mass amounts of support staff, both part-time and full-time workers. So, that have been unionized for, in some cases, 20 plus years. So yeah, union work can certainly be precarious.
Yeah, just to add to that, I would say, it's great that folks are able to join a union. Unions provide a lot of infrastructure that workers can actually bring the power together, whether it's withholding the labor through a strike, or having legal representation, or accessing collective benefits like a health plan. Those are a lot of things that a union can provide. But a union, I would see, is not like a sufficient condition of automatically it's great work. A lot of grocery store workers might be part of a union. USW 1998 at U of T, the University of Toronto, is a union of part-time temporary support staff on campus, and they face a lot of different challenges as well. So just because you're a union doesn't mean it's it's all bread and roses. But But it's great to have a union. One of the things that we do at the Workers' Action Center and supporting in the 15 Furnace campaign, the t-shirt, is that we're trying to push the minimum standards all across Ontario, because 70% of workers are not unionized in Ontario. A lot of workers never been in a union. The first time I was in a union was when I went to university. I was part of my student union. And a lot of workplaces, frankly, it's very, very hard to actually form a union because of the fragmented nature of our workplaces. We can't just all go to one big factory floor, hand out some flyers, be like, join the union, sign a card, you know? If you're a graphic designer, if you're a gig worker, if you're a courier, you know, it's gonna be hard to join a union. So how do you actually improve working conditions without a union? It's a lot of the work that we're doing. So you can change legislation, you know, or you can be a socialist. It's great. Yeah, join socialism.
Thanks so much for that. And, you know, I would be remiss not to put on my CUPE hat here and just say that, you know, I echo a lot of what you said. I think that as a union, we do a great job of sort of alleviating that blow that often happens from capitalism. You know, when I look at the University of Toronto and CUPE 3902, where I work, for example, and members there have access to over $3 million in financial fines that the union has bargained for them. They have access to paid parental leave. They have access to paid domestic violence leave. And those are all things that, absent a union, I don't see the employer providing that. Are they perfect jobs? No, not necessarily, because they're contracts, and you know, contract work isn't the best. But unions do a phenomenal job of really alleviating that blow that capitalism often deals us. Yeah, and so thanks so much to our panelists for their responses on that question. So I am going to move to a viewer question now. So university institutions seem to be PR machines these days. At Ryerson, a number of statements were made about protecting job security, maintaining pay, and making themselves out to be a progressive employer. What is the reality at Ryerson and other institutions, and what are the differing experiences between students, staff, full-time staff, faculty, and everyone who falls in between?
Yeah, so so essentially right when COVID happened, just to use this as an example, you know, there was obviously folks were expected to start working remotely if possible. And the university didn't really have a kind of communication strategy around this, or at least they didn't really appear to have one. So from a QB 3904 perspective, this really resulted in a lot of kind of unnecessary meetings, and you know, a lot of, I probably spent like 100 hours a week dealing with a lot of issues that came about right at the first couple of weeks of COVID-19. There was a lot of talk about whether or not TAs and GAs were going to get to continue working, whether they would get to keep the hours that they were promised in their contract, whether invigilators who were given contracts would get to continue working those hours. Or not, maybe not working those hours, but being paid for the hours that were listed in their contracts. So after a lot of meetings and fighting, the university ended up committing to pay continuity for all the Unit 3 employees, but it certainly took a lot of effort and a lot of long weeks. So and in terms of what they've been upholding otherwise, in terms of when a return to work schedule and things like that, I think that Ryerson anyway has done a pretty honest job at saying, you know, being at least to the emails that they send out to members and stuff, or their employees are pretty accurate and match what's going on with the union. But there was certainly chaos at the beginning of COVID. I'm not sure really what's going on at other universities though.
Thanks so much for that, Amber. So I have one last viewer question before we wrap up our webinar tonight. Do you think more people are becoming aware of the problems with precarious work? What will it take to get a broad support for action on the creation of good jobs?
Sarom, you go.
You go ahead.
Oh, I'll just be quick, man. you know, I keep feeling in my veins that in the last couple years, there's an increased awareness of this broad support of worker solidarity around with the climate strike, around with all the education, all the students striking for better working conditions. And most recently in the, during COVID-19, there's all this like great big support for frontline essential workers. People understood what is the role of a cleaner, what is the role of an educator, what is the role of a personal support worker. And this consciousness is getting very thick almost. I think we're almost there. I'm not sure what we need. Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Maybe Sarom, you have the last secret ingredient to galvanize and get this thing going.
I agree with you, Jared. And I think especially through the crisis, we've seen members of our communities and our people, you know, really become more activated in the political conscientization of really thinking through labor, decent work, access to basic rights and protections, dignity. And what's important is that as organizers, we have to be able to be coordinated in a way that we are connected and able to fight back, right? So a lot of folks are, you know, politicized right now, but it's the work of organized, organizers to bring them into an organization and to build permanently organized communities. So by that, whenever we face any kind of oppression, that we have the capacity to be resilient, to take care of each other, and to fight back. And so in this moment when we know that in this economic downturn and this global economic crisis, there's going to be, we're already seeing austerity measures come into play. We're already seeing heightening immigration enforcement. Just a couple weeks ago, the governor made an audit saying that there weren't enough deportations happening in Canada, right? And while they are suspended temporarily, we know that they're going to be activated. We know that we're already seeing a lot of fear mongering going around to get workers off of CERB, right? A lot of misinformation to scare us, and heightened policing, of course, and a lot of criminalization of dissent, right? We know all these things are coming our way, and it's our job right now to build the foundations to really strengthen the infrastructure for us to be able to speak back and really unite with each other in meaningful ways. Having good politics is one thing, but even if without that, it's about taking action, right? It's about you know, hitting the ground. The organizing happens on the streets, happens around the kitchen table. It happens when you pass your coworkers in the hallway, or right now on Zoom, when, like, you know, you're just checking in to see how they're doing, how your colleagues are doing, and really connecting with them in meaningful ways. I think as organizers, we have to really think about the concept of whole worker organizing. We're not just there as workers, but there are other parts of our lives, and that we might have other political demands that bring us justice beyond the contract fight, or what should be the contract fight, right? Anti-racism is the contract fight. Migrant justice is the contract fight, right? We're whole people, and we need to ensure that our organizing demands reflect and make space for the whole people that we are, for the whole people that our members are, so that we are permanently organized in this way.
Thank you so much for that, Sarom. And as that was our final question, thank you so much to our speakers for your contributions in this great discussion. We invite you, our audience, to take some online action by signing petitions regarding the issues raised tonight, and we will have them all linked in the Facebook chat. You can support campus unions at the University of Toronto and sign their petition calling on the university to move most courses online until they put together a sound reopening plan in consultation with workers and students. You can support CUPE 3913, representing contract academic workers at the University of Guelph, by signing on to their demand for a fair deal from their employer. You can join 12,000 others who have signed the petition for Migrant Students United, calling for COVID-19 crisis support specific to international students' need. And the Canadian Federation of Students Ontario is starting a new campaign demanding education for all. You can call on Premier Doug Ford and your MPP to act now to improve access to post-secondary education with the simple email tool on the CFS Ontario website. Again, the links to all of these petitions are in the chat box and event description for this panel. You can get involved in supporting the work that Sarom and the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change and Migrant Students United are doing by visiting their website at migrantworkersalliance.org and come out to the Status for All rally on August 23rd. You can support the work Amber and the Ryerson Graduate Students Union are doing to support their members by visiting their website, rsugrad.ca, and find out more information about the work folks at CUPE 3902 are doing at CUPE3904.ca. You can support the work that Jared and the Workers Action Center are doing at workersactioncenter.org, and the work that Fight for 15 and Fairness are doing at 15andfairness.org. And you can follow the work that I do with CUPE Ontario at cupe.on.ca and CUPE 1281 at 1281.cupe.ca. All of these links will be in the chat box and event description as well. Thanks again to our collaborators for this evening and the panel discussions in the Issues in Post-Secondary Education series, the Continuing Education Students Association of Ryerson, known as CESAR, the Ryerson Graduate Students Association, the Ryerson Faculty Association, the Jack Layton Chair of Ryerson University, and the Canadian Federation of Students. CESAR is inviting you to watch their next free online panel discussion on Tuesday, August 11th at 7 p.m. for an important conversation on Emancipation Month with community leaders, activists, and artists on the history, present, and future of emancipation and organizing in Canada. You can view this panel at mycesar.ca/emancipation. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Take care and keep organizing.